My name's Denico, and I'm currently the state forester of Maine, but in a previous life I was a forester for Scott Paper Company, and during the years the budworm was at its very worst, I was in the field working for Scott in various capacities, but mostly trying to figure out how to capture all the mortality that we were experiencing, which was quite a job. And I've been asked to reflect on what I remember about that time, and it's a little bit like a man trying to describe to other men what it's like for a woman to have a baby. Unless you've been through it, it's very difficult to describe, because to me, as I remember right, it seemed like the end of the world, the end of our industry. Now, I'll tell you why. As some of you well know, up north, there are great expanses of the spruce fir forest, landscape scale forest. And when the budworm came and started to feed on that forest, its impact was very visual. And I'll give you another example of that. Is the budworm is a sloppy eater. And what it does is it will take a needle and eat a little bit and then spin a web and leave it and go on to the next needle, and so on and on and on. And so what you do is you end up with a forest full of dead needles which turn red. So in July, you end up with a forest that, as far as you can see, looks like it's a flame. And after that, in later July, the needles, the red needles fall off, and it's just this dull, gray look. And then if you get 2 or 3 years of epidemic going on, then it's just dead. So it's an extremely visible phenomenon, and it's so visible because you get such landscapes of the spruce fir that exists up there. So again, unless you've seen it, you'd never believe it. You'd really have to go to Canada right now to get a good picture of it. And I'm doing a poor job of explaining it, because it's just so massive that unless you've been through it, you can't believe it. Lots of times you'll hear people talk about the lava spinning down when they'd be covered with larvae, and I never got into that so much. But what I remember is walking through the dead spruce fir forest, and you went from a very dark area, because the spruce and fir are so dense, the forest, the foliage is so dense, to suddenly you're walking in open sunshine through these spruce fir forests, and it's kind of creepy. It's just not normal. Nothing normal about it at all. But that's another thing I remember, is just these expanses where you walk through, and it's almost like you're in open daylight. It's easy to forget that we've been through budworm epidemics time after time after time, and the forest has come back. And when you're right in the middle of one, you think the world's come to an end, but it really hasn't, because it's just one more budworm epidemic we're going through. And the trees do come back, and the industry will come back. I will say this though, if the pulp mills hadn't converted to hardwood, we would have never been able to keep our pulp mills furnished with spruce fir, because we did not have enough after the epidemic was done. We wouldn't have had enough. The budworm came over a period of years, and you got used to it, and you got used to seeing this red forest that looked like it was fire, and then this dull gray forest, and then all these dead trees, and very frankly, it came at a pace where, being a human being, you just get used to things. So it wasn't like, if I'd come from Massachusetts and encountered it for the first time, probably recreational-wise it would bother me. But I kept on fishing and hunting, and went through those things, and it didn't impact me. But again, I went through it from the very beginning, so I got used to it. But if I was from away, it probably would have ruined my experience, very much so. Regretted we were so unprepared before, and I don't mean to make fun of the people, but our communications are so much better today. I can remember flying with the Maine Forest Service chief pilot, Charlie Robinson, in 1969, going down Route 11, and he showed me some quite extensive areas of severe feeding. And after that, I left IP shortly thereafter and went to work for Scott Paper, which is air miles, only a little over 100 miles away from where I was looking at the budworm. And I talked to these people about the coming epidemic, and they looked at me like I was crazy. I'm in the same state, same industry, everybody was using the same resource, and yet within 100 air miles, people that were just like it was another world didn't think too much about it. Now, fortunately, when it got bad enough, they all did come together, and they did a magnificent job. But this time around, one thing I decided to do, because I was in a position to do it as state forester, is we were not going to enter into a budworm epidemic without having everything prepared that we could have prepared. And I have been called an alarmist, and perhaps I am, but my job isn't to marginalize some of the bad things that could happen to us. My job is to point them out and prepare for them. So maybe the budworm won't be here in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe it'll be longer, and maybe I'll be called an alarmist, but at least I'll be the best, well-prepared alarmist that the state may have ever had. I can live with that. Well, you couldn't win it because we started out with so much spruce and fir. We had 130 million cords. It was not sustainable. There was no way we could have ever built up enough industry to take care of it all. So, yeah, we lost a lot of wood that just fell to the ground. We couldn't win that one. Can we win this one that's coming up? I think we can do a lot better at it because it's, the spruce fir is more in balance with what we have for markets, and it's going to get better. I'm convinced of it. And we'll have a better road system, and all those things have come together. So I think we've got a lot better chance of doing a better job this time around. But last time we were lost at the very beginning. We had too much wood out there. Nothing we could have done about it except watch it die, a lot of it. Well, I think one thing we've got techniques now to refine and define areas where the fir predominates. And we didn't have that before to any extent. So we can define areas by age and by species classifications and set them up to where we ought to be cutting a lot better than we ever could before, So with less spruce and fir out there and much better targeting and with the road system, I think we'll have to be in a much better position, much better. I think our job is going to be to keep track of how the epidemic is taking place in the landscape, monitoring to a certain level. The landowners will be doing more intensive monitoring than we are because they're the ones that are going to have to jump out there and cut the areas that are affected the worst. So we'll be doing a level of monitoring to let the landowners know where it is and what stage it is. Another job that we're going to have is to tell what it's doing to the inventory, to take the inventory as it comes to us every year and project with the budworm's impact, what that means for our future. So we'll be futuring what this is doing to us. That'll be a big job. And another job we'll have is if we do spraying, we're going to have to be in charge of monitoring that at some level to make sure that the public feels that whatever spray is going out, that it's the right thing to do in the right place, the right time. And we'll also have a role in harvesting. I don't envision that we have a system in place right now that's adequate to take care of the budworm epidemic. I've heard people mention that the Forest Practice Act is adequate through variance procedure, but there's no variance procedure that we've got. It takes too long. It's too involved that we'd never have enough people and be quick enough to have it happen. So we've got to have a different system, and what that is going to be, that's up to the people of Maine to decide, through the legislature and so on. But we've got to do something different. The last time we were reacting to a bad situation that already occurred. The budworm was here, the trees dying. This time, if we're smart, we'll be very proactive. And if we need to either harvest or spray, we'll be way ahead of any mortality maybe even ahead of heavy defoliation. That's what we've got to be able to do. We've got to be ahead of it, not behind it like we were last time. But I'll tell you one big thing we've got in our favor is when we cut now, the slash is taken care of in such a way that it isn't built up in huge quantities to carry a fire very well. And that's a huge difference. When we were cutting 4-foot wood and we were leaving the slash in the woods, 2 or 3 feet high everywhere, you had a huge risk. Even then though, that we didn't have a lot of fires. And this time around, the slash won't be as big a problem because of the way we cut our wood. And a lot of people are mystified as why we didn't have a bigger problem. And maybe we should give ourselves some credit as maybe we were extra cautious. Maybe we took that time to go out and take a check, and the Maine Forest Service had more people on the ground then, and I know they were looking diligently. So maybe we ought to just pat ourselves on the back and said we knew something bad could happen, and we were extra careful. If you go back, you'll find that we had 130-something million cords of spruce and fir. Those figures probably don't mean much to the public, but in relation to that, now we've got about 70 million cords. And what we've got now, a lot of it isn't anywhere near as mature as the 130 million cords were. That was very mature. And there was town after town after town. You could have 5 or 6 towns laid out that weren't roaded and hadn't been cut in for 50, 60 years or so. So huge areas, huge blocks of mature wood. And today, about every town is well roaded. And the volumes of spruce and fir are much more manageable. And the age classes are much more varied. So all those factors would tend to dumb down the budworm's impact on us. And today, we've had many meetings, and everybody's right at the table. Everybody's interested, from top to bottom in the spruce fir forest. The foresters are. And so the communications and the interest and the preparation is light years ahead of whatever we did before. Again, not to knock those people. They got kind of blindsided. And fortunately, there's enough of us old creaky old people around so that we were there in the battle. We remember. And we've made a commitment that it's not going to happen again on our watch to be unprepared.